Well, um, I- Hi everyone. This is Kathryn Fantauzzi. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Apollo Neuroscience. With me is my co-founder, and lucky for me, my husband, Dr. David Rabin, who is a psychiatrist and a neuroscientist who is the co-inventor of Apollo Neuro. And as the CEO and Dave is my co-founder, we built Apollo because we want to help people have more control over their health. And so we've got a lot of questions that have come in. We've been out on the market for about a year, and we're really excited to be answering your questions. So I guess, Dave, where I'm going to start here is, I think the first question people have is, what is Apollo and how does it work? So before we get into the detailed questions that we received, I really wanted to get into that. So how about we start there?
Sure. So Apollo is a technology that we developed out of the University of Pittsburgh research that I was conducting between 2014 and 2018. And it's when we originally developed it, there was no company in mind, and there was no product. There was just an idea in a lab that started in 2014 until Kathryn helped us translate that into the product over the course of those years, particularly from 2016 on. And the product is really focused on delivering a gentle vibration that signals to the skin a very similar signal that the skin receives when we're being touched or hugged by a loved one. And or if you're holding if you like pets, if you're holding a purring cat or a dog or something like that, that feeling is very similar, and it activates our touch receptors in our skin to signal safety to our emotional brain. And the emotional brain is a simple way of talking about what we call the limbic system for those who have some neuroscience knowledge out there. And the limbic system involves a couple different parts of the brain called the emotional sensory cortex, which is also known as the insular cortex, that interprets and is responsible for empathy, interoception, feeling our bodies and feeling our heart rate, our breathing, and being aware of our bodies physically, and sort of the general status of our bodies, and also introspection, looking inside ourselves. So everything that we do when we're either looking inside ourselves, thinking about ourselves, feeling our bodies, or feeling what other people feel, are all controlled by this emotional cortex. And those parts of our brains are turned off when we're under a lot of stress, and when we're especially under stress that involves the diagnosis of a mental illness or a physical illness, but also if you're just under stress because you're overwhelmed with too much responsibility in your life, working too hard, not getting enough rest and sleep, and or just overwhelmed in general with too much going on around us or in the world. And so we developed Apollo to create a way that to target this pathway that had never been done before, and to really help people feel safe from the body up, because the body remembers stress. The body remembers when we've been traumatized. It remembers when we've been in intense stress that hasn't been resolved, or when we haven't returned to a safe state. And unless we resolve that with our bodies, then our bodies continue to remember it, and can cause what's called triggered events, which many people with PTSD and mental illness are well aware of. And so, given that we were working with these kinds of folks at the time at the university, we developed Apollo to really help originally my patients with PTSD, depression, and chronic pain overcome these challenges that they were not getting sufficient help with from Western medical treatments. And it really worked for them. And we studied it in the lab, in clinical trials, which are currently in the publication process. And we have many more trials ongoing now that are showing consistent results, and real world trials in thousands of subjects that are showing consistent results, which is many of you may be participating in that which we greatly appreciate. And so that's kind of how the technology evolved. And I think it was really a critical point when, thanks to Kathryn helping raising our initial funding to build prototypes and test them in the real world after we did our first clinical trial, that Kathryn and I and a number of our friends and doctor colleagues were working in the hospital using the device, and we found that it really changed how we felt. It made us feel so much better at work, so much calmer, more focused, not so worried about all of the existential stressors of being overwhelmed and trying to control all of these things that are seemingly out of our control. And our days got better, our night sleep got better, and we just generally felt better, and it grew over time. And more people started sharing these experiences with us, and that's when we really made the decision to make Apollo available to everyone. So we're very excited to be able to, sort of 1 year out, share this technology with everyone and with you, and be able to answer some of your questions here that you have sent to us. So thank you.
Yeah, and Dave, thanks so much for that. It was a really thoughtful answer. For everyone on here, a couple things. If you want to ask questions, we're gonna go. So there's some questions that were all sent in advance, and we're gonna go through those first, and then we're gonna get to as many of the questions that we receive from the participants as we can. If you want to send a question, please use the Q&A section on the webinar. The chat section can get a little hard to moderate, so please use Q&A so we can sort through your questions. And then for those of you who can't attend the entire webinar or want to revisit this later, we will be sending out a recording of the webinar after the webinar. We'll be posting it to YouTube. And then along with that message, we'll also be sending out some helpful links that we have for articles on, for typical things that people are wondering about, like how best to use Apollo, typical Apollo schedules, and that sort of thing, and help center articles that have been useful for a lot of people in the past. So just know we will send a recording of the webinar. There will be some helpful links at the end of this, and please use the Q&A for questions. Dave, thanks so much for going through the background on the technology. I think one of the main questions that people really have is how they should be using the modes, right, throughout the day. What does a daily schedule look like? And how, certain people have goals that they're trying to accomplish, and they want to know, is there a particular mode that's better or not? So I think, could you go through what a daily schedule looks like, and then how consistently people should be using it? Is this just something you use when you're stressed out, or do you use it consistently over time? And what do you know from the data as to, what works best? You're on mute, Dave.
Thanks. I think that's a good place to start. So Apollo was, so I think when we looked at how to make Apollo most useful for people, what we were looking at, we looked at many existing treatments, many existing wearables that were out there, medical and non-medical wearables, and we really tried to figure out, what are these missing? What are people not getting out of these devices that they would like to get out of the devices? Similar with medicine, what are people not getting from their medicine that they would like to get out of their medicine? And I think one of the most common things that we found was that, medicine and a lot of devices, especially medical devices, really try to do a one size fits all kind of approach, where there's one mode or a couple modes, or with pills, the only thing you can adjust is dosage, but it's the same medicine, and you're just told, take this at this time or take this at that time, and then it's in your system the whole time, and you can't really control whether you can turn it on or turn it off or increase the effect or decrease the effect. And so we really wanted Apollo to be intentional and to align with our goals, because ultimately what we found, and what's been known in the psychology field for a very long time, is that our actions to accomplish our goals, whatever they might be, even something as small as getting up in the morning or falling asleep at night, or being able to get our work done and focus on our work during the day when we're tired, or socialize after work when we're tired, and anything like that, or do a meditation successfully, we need to have our actions aligned with our intentions to accomplish the goal. So what that means is, if we intend to wake up in the morning, but we have sleepy music going on, and we decide to roll over and cover ourselves with the blanket, then our actions are divergent. They're not aligned with our intention to get up. However, if we want to wake up in the morning, having, maybe some music that comes on that's more energizing, or maybe having something, a routine where the sunlight comes in through the window in the morning and shines on our faces, and the room is kind of set up to be able to help you get up. And similarly at night, if you're going to go to bed, don't drink coffee in the afternoon or caffeine in the afternoon. That would be a misaligned intention with our action with the intention of trying to fall asleep at night. So Apollo really works to align our actions, what we're doing, with our goals. So there's 7 modes in the Apollo. And what those modes start with are energy and wake up, which is the most energizing and stimulating mode of Apollo. It's kind of like an espresso shot, I would say. It's like espresso. It's not for everyone. Personally, I don't really use it very often myself. I prefer the clear and focused, or the rebuild and recover for wakeful energy. And there's lots of people like that. So if energy and wake up is a little too energizing for you, don't worry, it's not an issue. There's lots of other options that you can use to wake up. But energy and wake up is by far the most wakeful and stimulating and energizing of the modes. And most people use that first thing in the morning or before workouts. Then going down from there is every mode goes down in the level of general for most people. And there's some people who respond differently, but this is fairly consistent for about 90 to 95% of our users that we've tested so far. So going down from energy and wake up is social and open, which is kind of like a calm, creative, social flow state. It's really great for presentations, for video conferences, for socializing when you're tired, for anyone who has social anxiety they struggle with, especially now with COVID. And in some places, hopefully settling down, people are going out more. Socializing can be really tricky because we haven't done it in a while. So it's really helpful for that. And just general creative and group work. Going one down from there is clear and focused. So clear and focused is the mode that we actually have some of the most data on from our original clinical trials. And clear and focused is most helpful for, like it sounds, in sort of deep, sustained focus on one thing, kind of similar to what many people describe as the effect they get from an ADHD medicine. We have a lot of people with ADHD using the clear and focused mode in particular. That's a favorite because it helps with sustained work when you have to work for a long period of time, particularly on something that is boring, which many of us have to do. Then going down from there is rebuild and recover. Rebuild and recover is the most even and balanced of the modes. So this mode is really great after any intense stressor, physical, mental, emotional. It helps the body wind down very quickly. And we've shown that this mode actually reduces heart rate and increases heart rate variability very quickly after intense physical and mental stressors, which is very interesting. Similarly, the clear and focus we've shown has boosts heart rate variability as well in the midst of a stressor when we're very trying to focus, but we're clearly overwhelmed or bored or tired. And then going down from rebuild and recover is into the much more calming modes that have a lot of uses, but it's hard to describe all of the uses in the small window of the app. So meditation and mindfulness is a very interesting one. It's great for improving our access to meditative states, but it's useful for much more than that. The most common uses for it, I would say, are aches and pains. People who are just feeling achy, need to recover from feeling sick. It's a favorite for recovering from illness. When people are really run down as well and feeling burnt out, it's very helpful. When people feel like they're about to get sick, they use meditation and mindfulness quite a bit. And then the other use case is dental procedures. Believe it or not, people have told us many times that they use, and I use this myself actually, as well, to reduce pain and discomfort during dental or medical procedures, which is really interesting. And that's been a favorite there too. Meditation and mindfulness is a very useful one. And we actually refer to that one as sort of the calm flow state mode. And then going down from there is the relax and unwind mode, which is deep relaxation, very, very deep relaxation that most people would use before bed or winding down at the end of a long day. And then going down from there is the sleep and renew, which is what most people use when they get into bed to fall asleep, to help them fall asleep more quickly. And then when people wake up in the middle of the night, you can tap the buttons on the device to reactivate sleep and renew, or the last mode that the device was set to, and to help you fall asleep more quickly in the middle of the night when you might wake up in the middle of the night. So that's kind of the way the modes sort of go from most energizing to most relaxing, and sort of how people can integrate them throughout the day.
Right. And, with 7 modes and you're trying to figure out what to do, with your, like, when you get to that, which ones should you use? I think there's 2 things. I think there particular, a lot of times we get questions like, is there a particular mode that's better for one thing or another thing? Right. And, the other question is, well, what really is the difference between these modes? Like, why is social and open different from clear and focused? Why is sleep different from relax? And so I think what would be useful is to demystify this a little bit, is what is the science behind how these different modes work and how they affect the body, so that people have a better understanding of how these things work together.
Sure. So the science comes from a bunch of different areas of neuroscience. I think one of them is biofeedback and the neurophysiology around biofeedback, which is how to understand the relationship between our breathing and our heart rate over time, which is from starting in the 1950s or 60s, and has really been a major discovery in the last 20th century for health. So that's one side, and the other side is the neuroscience of music and touch. So the music in particular is interesting because it affects the way we feel, and it affects how much energy we have, and it does so on a relatively rapid basis. And so when we talk about, and many of us have had this experience, if not all of us, when you walk into a room and you're not feeling good, and you hop into a car, you're not feeling good, your favorite song pops onto the radio, and you're like all of a sudden kind of in the zone. You're not really thinking about what you were thinking about when you originally came into that room, or what was happening before. And this is very common. And in turn, we use certain kinds of music that's faster and more uplifting and energizing when we're working out or going out with our friends, than we would when we're meditating or falling asleep or relaxing at night. And this is really critical to understand, because this is a very old neurological pathway that has existed for probably millions of years. Animals have it, all mammals have it, and we have it. And it's hard, the relationship between music and touch and light, actually, as well, and smells, these kind of more physical sensations, affects the way that we perceive and interpret meaning from our environment, and has for a very long time, and will continue. So it's very important to understand that the frequencies we surround ourselves by impact the way we feel. So that's well known in neuroscience. And I think what we did with Apollo was we figured out that, hey, which parts of music are actually having this greatest effect at shifting our energy state, right? Which parts of music are having the greatest effect at shifting our mood? And then what if we take those parts and then we look at delivering them to the skin instead of the ears? Can we induce the same kind of response that one might get with listening to a workout like song, or a song for a workout, without hearing the song, but their skin feels something that's similar, parts of that rhythm, and then has a similar impact? So that's what we actually tested in the lab at the University of Pittsburgh, in actually 2017 through the present time. And we have other groups that have been looking at this as well with Apollo, and trying to understand even more in detail what exactly the impact on the body these rhythms have when they're delivered to the skin. But ultimately, from the work we did in 2017 through 2018, 2019, it became very clear that we had identified very specific patterns that could fairly reliably, and I say fairly reliably because it works for about 90 to 95% of people, but there's still 5% of people that may have a different response to the vibrations that it says on the than what we talked about here today. So it's good to play around because they can't hurt you. And you might like one better than the other, and the way we describe it may not be exactly perfect for you. But from what we found, it does work for about 90 to 95% of people this way, because the our bodies are actually much more similar than they are different, and the neuroscience has now shown that. And so by testing this and working through the neuroscience of touch, we figured out that, and music, we figured out that we could deliver these vibration patterns to the skin, and the body would react in a relatively consistent way for most people most of the time.
Right. I think that's one of the things is, with the mode names, is they're kind of like guideposts, right? Sleep and renew is the most low frequency, slowest oscillations. It's the most like, if you had to if you had to use a metaphor, it's the most like something rocking you to sleep. Whereas energy and wake up at the top of the spectrum is like a body alarm clock. And so these are all kind of in a spectrum from higher energy to lower energy. And so, for me, at least even when I was using this, like way back in the beginning when we were doing discovery, it was, I knew the science behind how that was supposed to affect me, but then it's also, certain people have certain favorites. And so the best thing to do is to play around, and if a specific mode isn't working for you, like there's one question here that says that sleep and renew actually made someone feel more restless. I think there's two things to think about there. One is if that's the case, I would try relax and unwind instead of sleep and renew. Relax and unwind is slightly more wakeful than sleep and renew, but they're really in the same camp. I use them interchangeably. I'll use relax and unwind before I go to bed, towards the end of the night, and then put on sleep and renew when I get into bed. The other thing to play around with is intensity. So, we use this motto, start low and go slow. Apollo is really not more is more. You don't need to turn the thing all the way up to max. Some people really enjoy that. They enjoy the sensation. They like having it at a higher intensity. And there's nothing wrong with that. But for a lot of people, it's actually more effective to start it right where you feel it, which is what we call the sensory threshold, which is, a fancy way of saying when you notice it. You should notice the vibration, but it shouldn't be distracting. And that is actually right where it ought to be set. And then if you want to turn it up more, you can, but really you're not going to get any more benefit. As soon as you feel it, that's right at your sweet spot. And then the other thing is, if over time you don't notice it anymore, that's okay. That means it's still working, but actually it fading into the background is part of the design. So, some people notice it all the time, but usually your awareness of it comes and goes. So for instance, if you're using focus mode at work, you may notice it in the beginning, and then you will stop noticing it. And then you may pay attention to it again when you have gotten distracted, is when you'll notice it again, when you're unfocused. And then it's kind of like a it's helping you be in focus mode, but it's also a little reminder about what intention you set, right? Which is to get whatever it is that you wanted to get done. Um, I think another just mode trick with energy and wake up, really common. A lot of people like energy and wake up because they like that boost of energy, but it really is the big boost of energy. So, I very rarely use energy and wake up. What I'll use in the morning is clear and focused, or rebuild and recover. Both of those help me wake up, and they're just a little bit less intense. If you do like using energy and wake up, again, starting low intensity and then moving up slowly until you can just feel it is really the right way to go about it. I think the other main question that we get mode related, with the daily schedule is, can you overuse it? And Dave, the point for Dave and I were very adamant about creating something that was non-addictive, could be used by vulnerable people, right? When we were looking at this, we were originally looking at people with, in the lab, we were looking at people with chronic treatment-resistant illness like PTSD, which also comes with lots of other things like, trauma and injuries. And we wanted to make sure this was also safe for kids. So the short answer is no, you can't overuse Apollo. The only limitation is, just when the battery dies, and then you plug it back in, but you can't overuse it. And we actually found, and Dave, I know we can't talk about too much about the study results just yet, but we've been doing almost a year-long study now on hundreds of our
We're
users.
at 1 year.
Oh, 1 year. Yeah. And what we actually have found is that Apollo has the data suggests that Apollo has a retraining capability. So essentially, as you use Apollo, the more consistently you use it, we're actually seeing that people's progress continues to improve over time. So it's not as if the body becomes tolerant to it and it stops working, or you need it more to get it to work for you. It's actually, what we find is that the consistency is key. So Dave, do you want to talk a little bit about like what the recommended schedule is to get the most out of Apollo? And I think the other thing is, a lot of people are really focused on which exact mode to use for what. And I think one of the most interesting things we found is that it's really using modes during the day and the night, regardless of exactly which modes, that is actually getting the most benefit. It's really just consistency of use, because Apollo across the board is helping the body recover from stress. So you can talk a little bit about that and what we're finding.
Sure. So, and I think just for those who don't know, we will send links out after this in an email. But there is a web page article that I wrote with Rachel from our team, who where we talk about the way that I use Apollo myself, and also which is very similar to the way that I use it with my clients, and it is called "How to Get the Most Out of Apollo," which is an article on our website that we'll drop here in a minute. And it is really the best 2-minute read that you can get about what everything you need to know to have the best experience with the device, and how to really tailor it to your needs without focusing on one specific mode or another mode. It's really about, as Kathryn said, integrating it into our lives as much as possible, because we're all stressed out. We all have stress, even when we're not working. We all have lots of responsibilities, lots of concerns, worries, existential fears about COVID and other things going on in the world. There's a lot of stress right now for all of us, and there's no doubt about the impact that that stress has on our bodies. So when we use Apollo, the best way to get the best experience out of it is to have it on throughout the day. And usually people have days or nights where some people wear it all day and all night. It's not required, but the people who use it during the day and during the night do tend to have the best results.
When you
And
say wearing it, do you mean actively using it, or do you
that's
mean?
what I was going to get to. Thank you for clarifying.
Okay.
Yeah. So actually just having it on your body is what I mean, because when you have it on your body and it's charged, then we're much more likely to just turn it on when we need it, because we designed it to not require the app to turn it on. So that's really important, because many of us don't have our phones within reach sometimes, and we don't want to have to go to our phones all the time, particularly when we wake up in the middle of the night. So the Apollo actually saves to the device itself the last mode and the exact intensity setting that the last mode was on. So at any time, and this is how I use it, I'll wake up in the morning, I'll set my device to clear and focused, and then to wake up and to get me focused through my morning, and not too distracted. And then that will go on for a half hour or an hour. And then when that turns off and I need another boost and I don't want to drink caffeine or put a stimulant into my body, because that might prevent me from sleeping later, I'll just hit the 2 buttons on the Apollo. It will restart the clear and focus setting, and that will give me another burst of energy and focus to get me through another couple hours. And every time by having it charged on me, I know I can just reach down and tap the buttons and turn it on. And I'm getting that boost whenever I need it, which is really nice. And I think what's really interesting that we're seeing about Apollo, to go back to the findings, the long-term findings, is that we see from people who use it regularly day and night, there's a cumulative effect in terms of benefit. So that means that the body learns what it's experiencing. And when we experience stress from the standpoint of fear, we learn to be afraid of stress. When we experience stress from a standpoint of safety, which Apollo helps contribute to this safety feeling in our bodies, then we actually approach stress from a standpoint of strength. And that strength and that safety that nurtures that strength in us to conquer stress, to conquer whatever challenges that we're facing at any given time, is actually something that accumulates over time. And this was something that we learned from Eric Kandel's Nobel Prize winning work in 2002, where he showed definitively that, and the work of many others leading up to that, that definitively what our parents told us growing up was true, that practice makes perfect. And that actually rewires, that practice rewires our nervous system to associate challenge and overcoming challenge and facing challenge with strength rather than fear. And so as we use Apollo to overcome any challenges throughout our day, even small things like getting up in the morning, focusing for work, relaxing after work or socializing after work, and transitioning into sleep and winding down at night so we can spend time with our friends and family calmly and then fall asleep and actually get good restful sleep. Every energy change or every change between each of those events is a challenge that we may not be thinking about, but it challenges our bodies to transition energy states. And so Apollo, by using it throughout the day, what does something called conditioning or learning that actually creates a process of rewiring our nervous system. And it's the same thing that deep breathing does, and it's the same thing that meditation does, but we can't easily, if we haven't mastered those techniques like deep breathing and meditation, it is extremely difficult. And this is also known in the literature, scientific literature. It's extremely difficult to engage in that breathing or that meditation technique in the moment of stress. So by having something on you that you can just tap the buttons and turn it on quickly and then not have to worry about it, it allows us to get a lot of the benefits of deep breathing and meditation that help us learn those skills more effectively and see the benefits of them before we might have mastered those techniques. Like most of us haven't. I haven't mastered those techniques myself. So
Right.
Apollo is really helpful for teaching me how to do it. And I think, to be very concrete about the results that we're starting to see over the long term, this period of 6 to 9 months that Kathryn was talking about, we're actually seeing resting heart rate come down by 5 to 10%. We're seeing average heart rate come down by 5 to 10%, which is a huge shift. And it's a huge shift to see
Right.
your heart rate come down that much. And HRV is going up over time, not just in the short term, but in the long term, cumulatively, that's consistent with more use. So the more consistently we use the device, and deep sleep gets better. So the more consistently we use the device, the better our cardiovascular fitness, because we're less stressed out, we're less overwhelmed more of the time, we feel safer more of the time. So our heart knows it's allowed to slow down. And then our body knows that we're allowed to enter deeper states of sleep and recovery because we feel safe enough to do so. Does that answer the question?
I think so. I think, you touched on a couple things that I want to highlight. One of which is, meditation and deep breathing, right? Which are tools, skills, ancient practices that, you can just look at that people are really trying to learn to help manage their symptoms, and are which, Apollo is very much based on. And I think I just wanted to highlight it because one of the things you pointed out is really important, which is, why we built this and why it works for so many people, which is that meditation and deep breathing are extremely important skills. Like deep breathing can bring your heart rate down, it can bring your pulse down, it can slow your respiratory rate, it really can help improve parasympathetic tone, right? Which in the end, helping your body recover from stress gives you more control, because when you have this balance in your nervous system, you have more control over the way you pay attention, the way your control over your thoughts, you have control over your emotions, and you're also control over your energy state, right? Like, I'm going to go unwind to go to bed, and they're great tools. But one of the reasons we developed Apollo, and you came up with this idea, was that it's actually kind of like a cruel joke that it's physiologically harder to learn those things when you're already stressed out. Like, if you think about it, you're much more likely to react to someone who cuts you off in traffic after you've had a really bad day, right? That's the equivalent, right? Trying to go to a yoga session or a meditation or deep breathing when you're already really stressed out, because you have that much further to go in terms of helping your body calm down. So, Apollo is really an accelerant to help people feel calm and have that tool that isn't outside their body. It's just using their sense of touch, which is innate to all of us, right? To help restore that balance. And so what we find is that as people are using these other practices become easier for them. So using Apollo and then learning breathing exercises or learning meditation or exercising more regularly also becomes easier as you use the Apollo, because you just feel better. And that was our primary goal, was to just help people kind of get more control over how they feel and put them back in the driver's seat. And so I think that was just a really important thing that you said that I wanted to highlight. Is an important question that came in that I think kind of touches on what you were talking about in terms of what we see, which is, if using it during the day and at night is supportive. So someone here is asking that they're having a harder time getting sleep, and they're using it. Maybe it helps them fall asleep, but then they wake up in the middle of the night. And I mean, this can happen for all sorts of reasons, right? Particularly as we age, and there's hormonal changes, there's things with diet that can all affect sleep. But when you're thinking about stress as the cause of waking up in the middle of the night, one of the things that I think is important to highlight is that what we saw and what we're seeing with the study is that people who use Apollo during the day are getting better sleep. And so what that's saying is, by allowing the body to recover during the day, right, using it to support, stress management with either, any of the modes, not so much energy and wake up, but the other modes to help restore the body, like clear and focused or meditation and recovery mode during the day, actually helps the body be in a better state for sleep later. And so one of the things we see is that people use it during the day to help support their stress management for all the things we all have to do. And then they'll use relax and unwind or meditation at the end of the workday, or to transition between, focused daytime mode and sleep mode. And then they use sleep at night. And when we see this kind of thing, it creates this positive reinforcement loop. So your body is more in a relaxed state when you're trying to relax, which makes it easier, right, to relax. And then you're more able to go to sleep. And so these things are reinforcing. And one other thing I want to touch on is
just like exercising during the
just
day,
like
or
exercise.
doing breath work during the day will help you sleep better at night.
Right. Just like exercise. I mean, using Apollo is kind of like exercise in a different way, because, you exercise your body to become stronger so you can go do more things. You use Apollo to retrain your nervous system to be in a more balanced state, which actually makes you more resilient over time. So for people who are having trouble sleeping, I would recommend using Apollo modes during the day and at night. And then if you wake up in the middle of the night, and I'm one of those people, I use both buttons. So that point you made where the last mode that you set at the intensity you set it at is remembered on the device. So if you wake up in the middle of the night, you do not need to flash yourself with the phone. We are going to work on dark mode. It's on the list. But you don't have to look at the phone. You just reach down and press both buttons, and the device will turn back on, which for me is a very useful tool for sleep. I think the last question I want to get to on this topic is wrist or ankle. Which one's better, and why? Why wrist or ankle?
Yeah, I wanted to get to that too. Thank you. So there is no better, I would say, for wrist or ankle. It's really personal preference. And from our clinical trials, it seems very clear that Apollo actually works on lots of different parts of the body. The wrist and the ankle we chose because they're the most convenient locations to wear Apollo. There are also some people who like to wear it on their arm. But it's really personal preference. And it just so happens that I think from what we know so far, it seems like 70% of people or so are wearing Apollo on their ankle more of the time than the wrist. It is generally, most people like the ankle for sleep in particular because it's further away from your head. And a lot of people don't like wearing things on their wrists when they're sleeping. So the ankle, I think the only mode that I will say that the ankle is absolutely better for is the sleep mode. Without a doubt, it works better on the ankle. Whether for the other modes during the
Is that
day,
because it works better, or is it that just because it's easier to wear Apollo on your ankle for sleep? Or
I think it's both. I think I can't tell you with 100% certainty that we know that it works better on the ankle for sleep in a scientific trial. We do know that people enjoy wearing it on the ankle more for sleep because they tend to feel the vibrations more throughout their whole body, and it's less distracting. And so on the wrist, typically people use the Apollo at lower intensities on the wrist because we're a little more aware of things vibrating on our wrists, and we don't like to be as aware of the vibration when we're winding down to fall asleep or trying to fall asleep in bed, or trying to fall asleep if we woke up in the middle of the night. So in general, the favorite for sleep is wearing it on the ankle. But for people who wear it more during the day, it's a 50. I would say it's pretty split. Personally, I'm an ankle user. I wear it on my ankle all the time. It's my favorite. I think the reason that I prefer it, which is why a lot of other people prefer it that I mentioned earlier, is because the bones of our legs are very, very dense. They're amongst the
And they're
densest bones.
bigger.
What was that?
They're bigger than your wrist bone also.
Right, right. They're bigger bones, they're denser bones, and they're amongst the densest bones in the body. And interestingly, dense material actually transfers low frequency vibrations better than less dense material. And that's just how sound works. So many people report to us that when they wear the Apollo on the ankle, they like it better because they feel it more throughout their whole body rather than just feeling it on the arm. But again, personal preference. Try it in different places. Try it on the inside of the ankle, the outside, the inside of the wrist, the outside of the wrist. Switch limbs. You can't hurt yourself with it. So try it in different places and see what works best for you. There isn't a right answer that's right for everyone.
And I think another one is, how tightly should it be worn? And can you wear it over a sock? What's your recommendation there?
So you can absolutely wear it over a sock or a sleeve if you prefer. There's no reason why you can't. The only guideline is, and I think this goes back to what you were saying about the intensity, which is the biggest mistake that everyone makes, is that the intensity level of the vibration should be just noticeable, and that's where Apollo tends to be most effective. Some people might feel that after they have it on and a just noticeable level, that over a sock or over a sleeve, that they like it a little bit higher than just noticeable, and that's fine. But you generally wouldn't listen to music by starting your stereo at 100% because you blow your eardrums out. So think about Apollo the same way, and start at a level where you just notice the vibration, but it's not distracting. And then if you want to turn it up little by little over time, turn it up over time to suit your preferences. But it should never be distracting. And that's the same whether you're wearing it over a sock or a sleeve or not. So if you wear it over a sock, you notice, you just have to turn up the intensity a little bit more so that you can feel it. But it works perfectly fine over a sock. I personally wear it over a sock all the time.
Right. And I wear it over a sock when I'm sleeping too. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. I think the other thing is just in terms of tightness, that it doesn't need to
Oh
be
yeah.
like really, really tight, but it shouldn't be loose. So it shouldn't be like flopping around, rolling up like a big bracelet or roll like spinning around on your ankle. It should be snug because the vibration needs to be transmitted through your skin. So you need to be able to feel it, but it doesn't need to be like really tight. There's no benefit to that. The other thing that comes up is, you know, any sensitivities, allergies, is this safe for people who have, skin sensitivities and allergies?
So the main thing about Apollo has been tested for biocompatibility, and so we have not seen any irritation from the device or the band itself. That being said, our skin oils and dirt from the environment do cause irritation to us when over time, just from the rubbing of anything on our skin. So if you wear a band of any kind, whether it's like a polar strap or whether it's another kind of wearable or a watch or something like that, those all, depending on the material they're made of, they accumulate different amounts of dirt or oils or sweat and things like that and dust, and they do have to be cleaned. So if you notice, some people have this happen and have a little bit of irritation from the dirt and the oils, and some don't. And it depends how oily your particular skin
Yeah.
is, or if you share your Apollo with lots of people, it's better to clean it more often.
Yeah.
But you
So
can just wipe it down with a gentle alcohol wipe or with a gentle soap and water, and just wipe it down if you notice any irritation at all. And that has pretty much solved all the irritation issues that anybody has. And you can also wear it over, if you have irritation, even if you are cleaning it, you can wear it over a sock or something like
yeah,
that, and that will also solve it.
it hasn't been much of a thing, but I wanted to make sure that people knew that, just like you wash your clothes, If you wear something all the time, you should clean it sometimes. And to clean the device, you can just use an alcohol swab, kind of like what they use before they give you a shot. Just use a little alcohol swab. It is water resistant, it's not waterproof, so don't put the device through the wash. But you can clean it off. And I honestly just clean my strap off with a little alcohol swab from time to time, because I wear it so frequently. And just like you wash your jeans, you should wipe this off every once in a while. I think the other question is, why one device? Why not two?
Oh, good question. So the reason why one is because it works with one. And if you can have one device that gets the effect you're looking for, then that's a big win, because it makes it a lot easier for people to access and cheaper. And you can get, and we so that's what we tested in most of our trials, because we really wanted to make this as accessible and easy to use for people as possible. Two devices adds a little bit of complexity. That being said, there are people who enjoy using two devices. Two devices do work. And I would say, if you're particularly for the calming and deep relaxation or meditation modes, and people who really want to focus on that, there are people who do use two devices at the same time, but it's not necessary to get the result. Is that a fair answer to the question? Was there anything else you wanted me to touch on there?
No, I think that's good. So I'm just scanning through the Q&A questions because we've covered a lot of ground. But I think, one of the things I'm seeing a lot of very specific health questions that
Yeah.
people have for different conditions that they might suffer from, or be dealing with. And I think, one of the things that we've found that's been pretty interesting, both in our trials, in the lab and at universities, and then also what we're seeing in this real world study that we're doing right now. And you can stop me if I'm telling too much, but I think one of the really interesting things is that the people who are the most stressed out, which is consistent with anybody who's dealing with chronic stress, but also people who have, uh, you know, any chronic health condition, because they're all worsened by chronic stress. The symptoms are exacerbated by chronic stress, like chronic pain, insomnia, anxiety, ADHD, PTSD. Everything's dysautonomia. Like all of these things are worsened. Headaches. All of this stuff is worsened by chronic stress. One of the things that's I found to be really interesting was when we look at the biometrics of people who use Apollo, the people who have biometrics that reveal that their body is under strain for whatever reason, either it's a chronic health condition, or they're not sleeping well, or they just have suffered an injury, or maybe they have like a viral or a bacterial illness, some sort of like, a cold, or they get an infection or something. One of the things that we see is that Apollo they get the fastest benefit, both in their subjective experience with the device, like noticing, wow, this made me a change, but also in the improvement in their biometrics. They see this big change. So I was wondering if you can talk about why people with these kind of variety of conditions might all be kind of experiencing a benefit, and maybe, how this therapy kind of works on the central nervous system, and how that relates to these other conditions. And one thing I will tell everybody is that, we are not providing medical advice. We just kind of want to talk about the research and help answer your questions, but this is not medical advice. This does not, you should definitely, if you have any questions specific about your condition, how to use this, you always consult your physician. But we're trying to provide as much information as we can. So with that, Dave, do you want to touch on that?
Sure. Where do you want me to start?
Kind of just basically like, what is this universe? Because they're getting lots of questions like,
Yeah.
what mode do I use for this condition?
Right.
One of the things we're seeing is that, there's a lot of commonality across a lot of different conditions that are worsened by chronic stress.
Right.
And that, that's not how we think about things, at least, in the US and in the Western medical model. We tend to think, I have this and therefore I do this. Like there's some
Right.
specific
It's
thing.
very prescriptive.
Very prescriptive, right? And
Yeah.
what we're finding is that that's not necessarily the case, and it's having kind of broad effect for a lot of people who are self-reporting back to us. We've done studies on particular conditions that are ongoing right now, but there's people who on conditions that we've never studied that are reporting this stuff back to us. And I think people kind of want to understand, how is this working and how is it helping so many different kinds of people?
That's a great question. So I think the best way to understand this is that, and I think you did a great job of explaining it, Kathryn, which is the idea that we look at illness in the Western model in a very kind of like black and white way. Like this is either physical illness or mental illness, and we consider, at least we have considered those for a very long time, to be separate things. But it turns out that physical health and mental health are very, very much interconnected, and there's not really a divide between them. If we're physically ill for a long time and not treating the illness, we will often develop mental illness as a result. If we're mentally ill for a long time or suffering mentally and emotionally and we don't treat that, then we can develop physical illness as a result. And this is very well known. And it's relatively, at this point, undisputed. So when we think about the impact that stress has on our bodies, what the illness is in most cases is it's the long-term outcome of repeated stress over and over and over again. And so whether you're talking about, and the body remembers that, right? So Kathryn mentioned, I believe earlier, the body keeps the score. There are a number of other great books on this topic, but the body keeps the score is probably the most famous one by Bessel van der Kolk. Who's a psychiatrist, a trauma psychiatrist as well. And Gabor Mate, another trauma and addiction physician, talks about this quite a bit. And I'll actually be speaking at a conference with him next week about this topic, which is that our bodies remember what's happened to us. Even if our minds don't remember, or even if we purposefully put it out of our memory consciously, our bodies remember. And so and that body memory can look like lots of different illnesses. It can look like PTSD, depression, pain disorders, physical or mental or emotional pain disorders like fibromyalgia is kind of a crossover between mental and physical pain, and anxiety and insomnia and many other conditions. Diabetes and metabolic disorders, another great example. High blood pressure, where being under emotional or mental stress for an extended period of time causes high blood pressure. It causes high heart rate more of the time, and insomnia, right? And so these are all connected, and it can cause metabolic disorder like diabetes and obesity. So the way that Apollo works to help these kinds of issues is there's not one mode that works for any particular disorder. It's about integrating a new practice into your life that normally before Apollo would have been a physician or someone saying, hey, you got to exercise 30 minutes a day every day to get your symptoms under control, and you got to eat right, and you got to deep breathe, and you got to do meditation and yoga, or one or a combination of all those things, which you should still do. At the same time, when we're really stressed out, it's really legitimately hard, as Kathryn was saying earlier as well, to embrace some of these new changes, to these new behavior patterns, especially when you're trying to do multiple changes at a time and you're already stressed out and overwhelmed. The body opposes change. We don't want to change when we're already stressed out and overwhelmed. So, or when we're sick. So it requires more effort to make those changes during those times. So what Apollo does is it helps provide a little bit of support, what's called bottom-up support from the body first, to help soothe the body and calm the body and remind the body that it's safe enough to enter a recovery state that facilitates rest, digestion, immunity, healing, creativity, good balanced metabolism, emotional regulation, empathy, attention control, focus, and all of the important stuff that make our lives good and rich and full that basically don't get resources when our bodies think that we're running from a lion. And that is sort of the crux of sort of where all of this comes to, because our bodies don't know the difference between running from a lion and having too many emails or too many responsibilities or COVID. Our bodies don't know the difference. Our minds know the difference, but it's hard for our minds to see through it all sometimes, especially when we're constantly overwhelmed. So Apollo reminds the body that we're safe, and using it throughout the day as much as possible, especially in the beginning, trains our bodies to remember that we're actually safe more of the time than we might have thought we were, or that our body remembers that we are. And then that allows us to enter these recovery states more effectively, to make deep breathing more easy, to make getting exercise more easy, to improve motivation, to make change easier. And that's what really jumpstarts the healing process. So as Kathryn was saying so eloquently, it's a catalyst. It speeds up an already existing process in all of us that we have the ability to access at any time, but we may have forgotten how to access it, or haven't or we don't haven't learned ever how to access it. And Apollo really helps to smooth out the ability to do that. So in some of our studies, we see in the case reports people telling us they have great results using Apollo for PTSD and dissociative disorders, chronic pain disorders of all different kinds, especially things like fibromyalgia, and neuropathic pain, nerve pain related disorders. And people have reported to us great results for things like ADHD and insomnia, and disorders that are worsened by stress tend to be the disorders that have the best responses. And the people who have been feeling the worst for the longest period of time have the greatest to gain, right? So those people also tend to report the most dramatic improvements over the shortest amount of time, because their bodies have been stuck in this memory of being unsafe for the longest time. So for them, feeling safe even just for a moment is a huge change for them, and their bodies are able to shift into a recovery mode, which is a very noticeable and substantial impact on things like chronic pain, digestion, and many of these other things that we were talking about, even regulation of blood sugar, and heart rate, and heart rate variability, cardiovascular physiology, and that kind of thing. So we don't have studies in all of these areas right now, to be clear, but we are working on them, and we're very excited over time to be able to start sharing this more data with you.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we're not reducing stress. Stress exists. What we're doing is we're helping the body be more resilient to stress. And, when you have a condition of any kind, which might be a long-term thing, or you might just be kind of burned out. 2020 was a heck of a year for a lot of people. I think there's really no one untouched. What ends up happening is your body is just in this kind of primed state. And you're going to see consequences, right? Like you are stressed out, you don't sleep well. You're stressed out, you have a harder time focusing. If you have a condition, your symptoms get worse, right? Which goes from all the things you talked about, mental health states, but also like GI disruption, skin condition disruption, like all this kind of thing happens because when the body is chronically stressed out, it misfires, right? And if you think about it, it's like a car not well maintained, you're going to start having issues and need to bring it to the shop. I think the main question I had is a lot of people ask for like specific protocols for specific things. And I know we haven't done clinical trials on every one of these stress related conditions, but I think the main message is the protocol that we recommend works for most people. So using a mode during the day to help you manage, your stress level, and then using modes in the evening to help you recover and get the good sleep that you need, and using it consistently. Like one of the things we're seeing is like 5+ days a week, 2+ hours a day is really where we're seeing people get continual improvement over time. And so regardless of what you might be suffering from, or why you might have used Apollo, some people have conditions, some people just want to improve their resilience to stress, and they're just like health optimizers and they want to get the most out of themselves, whatever it is. It's very consistent. I think that there are certain modes some people like better than others. So play around, like play around with the modes. And, if it feels good to you, that's a really good sign, because one of the things we've seen so far is that the data from how people's bodies are actually changing matches up with their subjective experience, which you don't always see, right? People who say they feel better with something actually show improvement. So if you like meditation mode, it's not just for meditation. Go for it. It's very relaxing and people really like it, and helps with, body tension. Just play around with the daytime, nighttime modes and figure out what's right for you. That would be, I think, my way of summing it up.
Yeah, that's a great point. And just to give people an example, meditation mindfulness mode is probably our least used mode, but it's actually one of the best. It's one of the best modes. I'm using it right now just to give myself, an even, calm flow for our conversation. And I think that, I use it all the time, and it's a really great one. So play around with, this is creating new space for us to learn about our bodies with Apollo as a tool. And Apollo can be really helpful for showing us how we can feel in a certain situation that we may not have realized that is possible for us. And it really helps us to learn how to achieve our goals more effectively in different challenging situations, especially with transitions throughout our day. And I think just one thing to sum up that I think is really important is that, as Kathryn was saying, stress is unavoidable, right? We cannot avoid stress in our lives. It will be there always, and it is there often for a reason, because stress is required, and we're required to face it to grow as human beings and to become stronger and better, and to get closer to our full potential. What we can avoid is suffering. And suffering is the resistance to that stressful thing happening. So if we face the stress head on, which is the whole point of the teachings of breathing and meditation and mindfulness and Apollo, you face the stress head on and you tackle it, seeing it as a challenge and an opportunity for growth. We're that much more likely to come out of it feeling stronger and feeling better and actually learning something. And if we face it with the standpoint of, why me? Oh God, I can't believe I have to do this again, or anything similar to that, or thinking about wishing not to have to do it, or not to have to face the stress, then we're just prolonging the pain of, or the suffering of, dealing with that thing we have to deal with. So face, if we understand that stress is inevitable and we got to face it to grow, then tools like Apollo and breathwork become extremely valuable along our journey to help us.
Thanks, Dave. I think there's a couple like nitty-gritty questions. One of the things you touched on a little while ago, but might not have been answered, or some people might have not heard the answer, is inside of the wrist, outside of the wrist, inside of the ankle, outside of the ankle. Does it matter, and why? Where should people wear it?
So it doesn't really matter. It's really personal preference. Again, I personally think that, I use it on the outside of my ankle and the inside of my wrist. It's mainly for convenience, though, because it has to do with the kind of shoes that I'm wearing, or whether I'm going to be sitting at my desk typing or not. And if I'm going to be sitting typing, and I'm definitely not going to wear it on the inside of my wrist, I'll wear it on the outside of my wrist or on my ankle. So I think it's really about, what is your goal, and what is your personal preference in terms of comfort wearing the device. So you can't go wrong, but I think using your body as a sign of what feels the best, what feels good, and is really the best guide, as Kathryn said. Our heart rate variability, our breath rate, our sweat, the way our bodies respond to stress is all related to, directly to, whether we're feeling good or not. And if we're feeling good, then our body is going to respond in kind and resemble what it's like to be in a healthy, good feeling state. If we're not feeling good, then our body is probably going to show signs of stress.
I think another one is we talked a lot about the daily schedule, right? About using modes during the day to help us, basically stress manage with the things we got to take care of, then using modes to help us unwind and really transition between day to night, and then the sleep mode at night. But one of the things is, Apollo has about 6 to 8 hours of battery life, and people want to use it all the time. And so, while we continue to work on improvements to extend the battery life, is there a particular charging protocol or recommendation you make for people who are using Apollo so that it's always ready when they want it?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess the way that I do it is, and in the way I recommend to most of my clients is, to try to find times during the day when you wouldn't normally use or need Apollo, and plan those as your charging times. So the most common charging times that most people use are meal times, um, and then some people have a time where they're like working out, or they're doing something during the day where Apollo just, working out, showering, swimming, something like that, where Apollo either isn't a good fit because of the water, or it's just not useful to you during that time. And those are the good times to charge it. If you are the kind of person who likes to wear it 24/7 all the time, just pick a 1 to 2 hour period, and you can split it up. You could do 2 1 hour charging periods or something like that. And just pick a couple times during the day that you designate as your charging times, and that will typically give you the best benefit, where you will have it always charged whenever you need it, which is the best condition to be in.
Yeah, so for me, I use the Apollo at night to sleep. And when I wake up in the morning, when I'm going and making coffee or having a cup of tea and taking a shower, I'll throw it on the charger then, so that when I'm done getting ready, it's ready for me for the day. And then so that it's juiced up for night. When I'm having dinner or that kind of thing, I'll throw it on the charger to get juiced up for the evening. And that's really what you said. I'm water, not friends with showers, and so I do it then, and I do it when I'm eating dinner, and that works out for me. So I have it whenever I need it. The other question was, how do you change out the bands? So in the box you get two bands. One is a large band and one is a small band, or a medium-sized band rather, that fits most wrists, like nearly all wrists, and some ankles. And that's the one I use. I wear it on my wrist and my ankle. So to change it out, yep, Dave's doing it. Dave, I don't know if they can see you if you're not talking, but if you can slide the strap out from underneath it, and then slide the other strap. You can slide this other strap right back into it, underneath the clip. And then we also are now selling extra small bands, which are good for people with really, petite people with smaller wrists, small ankles, and children. So that was one of the other things, Dave, is the, I love this demonstration. You're like Vanna White. Dave, is this safe for kids? Is one of the questions people had.
So luckily, Apollo seems to be safe for everyone at this point. We haven't seen any safety issues that have been concerning in any way. And we developed it to be useful for children, and for vulnerable populations, so elderly folks, pregnant women, and people who normally are not good candidates for medicine. So yes, short answer, it is safe for children. We have lots of children using it, and we have a very exciting study ongoing that is currently evaluating children using Apollo.
Right. That's great. And one of the things we do find is that for a lot of people, they want to use Apollo instead of certain things like caffeine or stimulants or alcohol or other drugs, because a lot of times we use these substances in order to manage symptoms or to facilitate a state change. And so it's really great that Apollo works for children, because those substances are not always appropriate for kids. And kids need help focusing at school, Zoom school. If you didn't know before, Zoom school definitely taught us that. So yeah, I'm really thrilled about the study and how it's going. We got in two kinds of questions that are, one is about heart rate variability. Yes.
Oh, you're gonna ask that real quick? The
yes.
HRV question?
Yeah, there's an HRV question. There's also one question which is real quick to answer, which is, why is there not an exercise mode? There actually is an exercise mode. So you can use clear and focused before exercise to kind of prime your body. Or if you're somebody who really likes a lot of energy, you can also use energy and wake up before exercise.
That's a favorite amongst the weightlifters.
Yes, people who really like, strength training, really like energy and wake up, but you only need it for like 5-10 minutes. It does not need to be on for very long. I'll use clear and focused, mostly to just get myself in the mood to exercise. And then after exercise, rebuild and recover is really good. It's actually one that we used in the study at the University of Minnesota with NCAA athletes to actually improve recovery from strain. Because when you think about stress, mental stress, physical stress, it's strain on the body, right? And so in order to improve your resilience, you want to have higher heart rate variability, which basically means that your body goes back to its resting state after a strain faster, more adaptable. You're able to bounce from, a high cardiovascular state, for whatever reason, you're fleeing a lion or you're running. And likewise, you want to go back to normal quickly. And that's a sign of good cardiovascular health and resilience. So rebuild and recover post-exercise and either clear and focus or energy and wake up before. And then the other one is we're getting a lot of questions about heart rate variability. How do I track it? Which trackers to use? I think when we think about that, and then how do I know I'm getting results, from Apollo? When they're tracking heart rate variability. And I think one of the things that we should really touch on is how to track HRV, and what HRV really means as a metric.
So HRV is a bit of a complicated metric. It's been, and someone asked also to follow up on the exercise, why not during exercise? It can be used during exercise. It's just doesn't really seem to help much one way or the other. So we don't recommend it because we try to recommend things that help. So the biggest benefit that people get that is very clear is before exercise and after exercise, according to what Kathryn just said. During, kind of neither here nor there. So that's what we recommend is really the before and after, not during. With respect to HRV, heart rate variability, is the rate of change of our heartbeat over time. And we have some really great articles on heart rate variability that I believe someone from our team just linked in the chat. But I think the short of it is that all techniques we've been talking about here today boost heart rate variability, which is a sign that our overall health and adaptability and resilience is improving. So it's a measurement that we trend typically over time, unless we're measuring it in the lab or in the clinic. In the lab and the clinic, we have very sensitive technology that we can use in like an electronically shielded room, where there's no interference, and we can detect heart rate variability using an EKG machine, and do very precise metrics over a period of as short as 3 minutes. But in the real world, these measurements are very unreliable and very hard to do because we don't have that controlled environment in the lab. So we've done both lab and real world studies, and we've seen in the lab that Apollo improves heart rate variability in the short term under stress within minutes. But in the real world, there's a lot more going on than what's going on in the lab. So in the real world, the devices that we use to track HRV, the Oura Ring, Apple Watch, Fitbits, I think one Fitbit can now track HRV. I think one Garmin device can track HRV. These technologies are really nice to trend, but they're not great at to trend over weeks or months, but they're not particularly accurate on the 24-hour time scale, and especially inaccurate on the less than 24-hour time scale. So what that means is when you're looking at your HRV as it's changing day to day, the accuracy is kind of so-so when you're looking at it on your wearable. And that's just the way it is because the technology is just not quite there yet. And we have a lot of other things that influence our HRV, like movement, prevents us from being able to measure it well on the go. So what's important is all the techniques that we mentioned here improve HRV. By improving the balance of our nervous system to favor recovery, HRV goes up. When we are feeling safe, safety is a trigger to tell our bodies that they can settle down and enter a recovery state, and that can be measured as HRV going up. So over time, as you use Apollo, as you do deep breathing exercises, yoga, good nutrition, regular exercise, and everything else we've been talking about, you can see a trend in your HRV going up over time. And that's a sign that the resilience of our bodies is increasing on a cumulative level. That means we're not just meaning that today I'm more resilient, but tomorrow, who knows? It means today I'm more resilient so that I will be more resilient tomorrow and the day after, which is really exciting. And that's something that biofeedback, the biofeedback scientific community has really pioneered over the last 30 years with breath exercises. That taught us so much that we were able to do the same and get the same kinds of results with Apollo.
Right. And I think one of the things that people wonder about is, they might be using an Oura ring, an Apple Watch, a Polar strap to track their heart rate variability. This isn't everybody, but a subset of people are really interested in this metric. And one, those different wearables will all tell you a different number. And two, they might be looking at, I got a question in here that they haven't seen in a couple weeks that their HRV has changed pretty dramatically. And I think one of the things to think about, and Dave, I love your commentary here, but the heart rate variability is really just a metric to reveal the balance of the nervous system in general. So there's much more going on.
And it's impacted by literally everything we do.
Literally everything. So Apollo is very useful. And one of the reasons we were so excited about it in the lab when you talked about that initial trial is we had people do a chronic stress task where they have to listen to single digit numbers and add the last two they heard every 2 seconds for 3 minutes, which is a task called the PACEAT that they give astronauts before they go into space to make sure they're not going to rip the bathroom door off the shuttle. It's literally a test for futility. And so what happens is this basically creates like a standardized test feeling in people where, C, like you're freaking out at the end. And no matter how good you are at math, people do poorly on this. And so it's really reliable for making people have high heart rate, sweating, low HRV, poor performance, right? Inability to focus. And when we saw that we can improve heart rate variability in that context and also bring down heart rate and help people stop sweating and essentially help people recover from stress when it was happening, that was a really compelling thing for us to learn. And then as we have seen over time, we do see improvements in heart rate variability in people who are, athletes in terms of their ability to recover from strain in the moment. But that's really hard to track with an Oura ring or an Apple Watch or any of these things because we're using lab grade and it's in a moment of stress. So you're obviously going to see a difference because normally HRV goes down when you do those things. So if we see HRV go up, that's really interesting. So we're basically creating a counter effect of the stress by supporting the body's recovery from it. But when you're tracking your HRV over time, first of all, don't track it like day to day and worry about it too much unless it's a really precipitous drop. Because what you're really trying to figure out is just trend over time as a marker of how you're doing. And one of the things, people say, if they're trying to like make sure that their HRV is improving is it's affected by a lot of things. It's affected by your sleep duration, efficiency, and quality. It's affected by what you eat. It's affected by how much you move, how much you exercise, and alcohol consumption, particularly in the time frame before bed, will really damage HRV. It is because heart rate, they've been telling people with, if you're not well, don't drink because it suppresses your immune system. It suppresses your resilience. So there are a lot of factors with heart rate variability. The main thing takeaway is just you want it to be stable and trend upwards. And it's really, if you're not feeling, it can be an indicator that you're not doing well. You're not sleeping well. Your body is fatigued in some way. And you should look at that metric really as a signal. If your heart rate variability is low for some reason, it's time to pay attention to the things in your life because maybe you're chronically stressed out or you're not moving enough or your alcohol consumption is affecting your immunity and your resilience. Those are the kinds of things I think to pay attention to with HRV.
And when we say low, we mean like under 40.
Like
So if
really
you're so if you're under 40 milliseconds, your HRV as measured by whatever wearable on a consistent basis, you're under 40, then that is a sign that it's probably good to start prioritizing some recovery strategies in your life, getting more sleep, doing some breath work, getting more exercise, maybe improving your diet a little bit and that kind of thing. And Apollo can help as an assistant to that as well.
Yeah, I think we covered it. Let's see.
Oh, the last thing is we have a webinar that we did last month with Dr. Brian Donahue, who is a cardiologist who is an expert in this kind of thing with HRV and cardiovascular health. So if you have anything more you want to learn in a deep dive on that stuff, please check out the webinar on our YouTube page.
Yeah, and then I think you also wrote an article about heart rate variability. That's on our blog.
3 articles series on our blog that you can check out about how to different techniques and for optimizing heart rate variability and resilience and adaptability with Apollo and other strategies.
Got it. Well, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. We are over by about 20 minutes. So I just want to check in, Dave, before we wrap up. And again, for everybody, the webinar will be shared. After this, we'll put it up on YouTube and we will share helpful links like the ones we've described here out in that email. But I guess, is there anything else that you wanted to tell anybody, tell the participants before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I was just going through the questions here to see if there's anything else that we didn't answer.
Yeah, I think,
Um,
I have a fun one. You want to do a fun lightning round?
sure.
Okay.
I think the main thing is for everyone who has a specific illness of any kind that they are interested in how they can get the most out of Apollo, check out the article, How to Get the Most Out of Apollo, please. And then, because that article is the instructions not only for giving you the quick 2-minute primer on Apollo, but also how to customize it to your personal needs. And there is a little bit of a personal getting to know you process in this, where figuring out how to get the most out of Apollo is something that, without us personally knowing you, it's tricky for us to give recommendations to everyone. So read that article, please. It's only a 2-minute read. It's really, really helpful, and it will give you everything you need to know about how to customize it to get the best experience.
Yeah, I think that covers it. That's kind of what I was going to talk about. Well, I appreciate everybody's time, and for spending this extra time with us. And we will get the recording to you along with the helpful links. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who participated. And Dave, thank you so much for your time. And to the Apollo team and the customer service team for suggesting this, because I think it was a really great idea. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Take
Take
care.
care. Bye-bye.